All right, welcome to Return on Podcast, where we talk about the experiences, the obsessions, and the habits of the most successful e-commerce entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Tyler Jefcoat, and I want to welcome you again to today's show. Guys, I'm really excited in today's episode to interview one of my good friends, Michael Mayer from Cartology. You can find his agency at thinkcartology.com. Michael's been a thought leader in the Amazon space for many years now, was a brand owner, a seller himself that's pivoted into kind of the boutique-y, smallish side of the agency model. He has a great team. He helps several of our clients here at Seller Accountant, and he's a good guy. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. It's wide ranging, and it's funny, in a couple of moments of the interview, I was thinking, wow, let's talk about the tactical side of Amazon PPC. And really where Michael wanted to go more than anything else is, wait a minute, do you understand your customer? Do you understand how to build a brand that means something, that stands for something? And so if you're in that spot where you're trying to figure out, how do I make sure I have product market fit? How do I make sure my offering is resonating with my audience? Then this interview that's coming up with Michael Mayer from Cartology is one that you're going to really enjoy. Just a quick reminder from the housekeeping standpoint that Return on Podcast is brought to you by Seller Accountant. That's the accounting firm that I own. We do bookkeeping. We do fractional CFO. Guys, we'd love to help you. If you're at a point where you're looking to manage your cash flow better or get your books in order, not just because, yay, it's sexy to have cool books. It's actually not. Bookkeeping is definitely not sexy, but having good information, good visibility where you can make better choices on where to drive your business. Now that's a game changer. And so if that's where you are, if you're at a point in your business where it's time to look at dumping the bookkeeping headache, I hope you'll take a look at Seller Accountant and give us a call or schedule a free discovery call with us. All right, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. It's time to maximize profitability and cash flow. It's time to learn habits and hacks from the best e-com CEOs. It's time for Return on Podcast with me, Tyler Jefcoat. All right, welcome back to Return on Podcast, and I am excited. I'm really excited to get to visit with my friend Michael Mayer today of Cartology. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I just now am getting your podcast title, Return on Podcast. That's great.
It's like, it is funny. There's this moment, and of course I'm a CFO, so I thought it was clever, but then it's amazing to me how often I have to do the ROI, ROP, get it? And people are like, oh shit, you're intentional about that. Wow, that's kind of cool.
No, it's great. It's great branding. So I love it. But thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, thanks for being here, Michael. So Michael is a really good friend of mine. There's some really good people in this space that you and I play in, Michael. And honestly, I've been grateful to get to know you over the last few years. Also, guys, I want to pitch this. The Longer Game is Michael's podcast. Really good show. You should check it out as well.
Episode 15, I had a really great guest on.
Was he bald and attractive or whatever?
He was bald and very attractive, yes. And he has a podcast too.
That's weird. This is getting strange here. Yes, actually, I think we're in the middle of Inception. We're coming back out into the next layer of it
right.
here. So, hey, Michael, I want to talk all things Amazon, advertising, brand management. What is current? But before we do that, let me back up a second. And each of us that has taken the leap of faith to build our own company has had some set of circumstances that kind of led us down that path. What was it? What went wrong, dude, that made you start your own company?
The easiest way, I've got this down pat, by the way, because I've said it so many times, but the easiest way to explain it is I started my own business because I hated the job that I was at. It's a pretty good reason to start a business, right? I was the manager of a Starbucks, and I didn't really know. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a late bloomer, I guess. Always very driven, always very hardworking, but not totally sure, like, what is my, purpose? A lot of moments like that. And so I even quit college at one point to be full-time with my band that I was in because I wanted to be a rock star. Maybe still could be, who knows? I mean, that's all, always a possibility. I won't limit that. my future to whatever. But no one else in my band quit either. So it's just me. I was like, I'm gonna quit school. I'm really gonna lean into this, try and get us to grow, etc. Band broke up that quarter. Very, very tough quarter. And I had people like begging me to family, begging me to stay in school. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then ended up going back in the next quarter. But I graduated school, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I just kind of worked my way up it. Starbucks, I loved there was a cool vibe there. And I loved it was before everything became very like sugar drink. It was kind of starting to become that way, but there was still a coffee culture that was there, which was a lot of fun. And as I got into that store manager position about a year, and I was like, I hate this. This sucks. My boss at the time was not good. She was very much leading out of fear, planting people, trying to catch you, trip you up on things. If I had not left, she would have fired me for sure. She would have found a way to fire me because I saw what happened after I left. Friends of mine who got fired, that was not a good reason for getting fired. They got fired. So anyway, I left after I started my own e-commerce business. I had sold old music gear on eBay. So I had familiarity with the marketplace concept, but I had a friend who was doing it with new product. And I was like, please teach me what you want. And if you've been in the e-commerce industry, over the past decade or so, like I have, you get people that are like, what are you, especially if you run an e-commerce business, what are you doing? Show me how to do it. I want to start a brand. Very few people actually take you up on that offer to learn or to do whatever they need to learn to actually grow a brand. But I really wanted to get into that. So I did it on eBay for a year. Was like, all right, this is working. I took a salary for 6 months, proved it. My wife and I talked about it, left my job, launched on Amazon, did that for 6 years. And that's what got me into just the e-commerce space in general. So I hated
Love
my
it.
job.
Well, yeah, hate your job, you start a business. That's so for anyone out there who hates their job, this could be the moment to take the
This could
leap.
be time to start a business.
But
But I will say it was not just this is good for any brand business owner, especially talking about, what's current from an Amazon brand perspective, but I ran my business for a year while I worked a full-time job. Actually, I was working a full-time job and part-time I was teaching drum lessons. I was doing everything I could to get to get out of that Starbucks role, and I didn't know what was going to work. So I really crushed it for about a year, just worked my ass off, and it wasn't until I was like, okay, this can work, did I take that next step. So it wasn't like I just said, I'm going to yeah, let's just see how it goes. And I don't want this. Like I still endured for a while. So it took time to actually get there because taking a salary was taking from the profitability of the business. And looking back, if I could have maybe gone and made it an extra year and not taken a salary, I may have considered doing that. But I don't know if I would have lasted that long because it was not a good environment there at the Starbucks.
But it's I think we do, especially because the market has been so bullish for the last decade. We can kind of assume that the normal entrepreneurial story is to burn the boats and dive in head first. But actually, the story you just told is the one that I hear absolutely the most often on this show, which is I did what Jim Collins said. I fired bullets before I fired cannonballs. I tried things. I made mistakes, but I made mistakes as long as I possibly could with some kind of source of funding because no business can afford to provide my lifestyle and it's almost like a fire, right? The fire can't provide heat and it just needs a lot of fuel. It needs everything it can possibly get its hands on. And so, way to go, man. I appreciate you as a friend, but I also respect that you've persevered through a lot to build Cartology and to pivot from e-commerce to managing brands. Hey, let's talk about managing brands for a minute. So, the Amazon reality, the frenemy Amazon that we all work with continues to evolve. And I'm just curious, what is it that is occupying your attention, your mind space when it comes to managing brands on Amazon right now?
I think not I think, but I know the landscape is very different now than 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 5, 7, 10 years ago. When I first got started as a seller, you would look back at some of those listings and just some of the approach to things, and it would feel egregious to where things are at right now. And really Amazon specifically, but it was all very SEO driven? Do I have the right search terms? Am I a lot of tips and tricks? And there were not a lot of people that were super vocal about what to do then. There were a couple of maybe like agencies or advertising companies that were out in front that were giving information. There are a couple of sellers that are still involved in the community now that were really vocal about stuff. Chad Rubin was one of those people. I remember, you know, being a seller myself and reading about his account getting shut down on Christmas Day, and that just, felt like a gut punch. So just like things like that, it was a lot of trial and error, and there like FBA wasn't even really was starting to become more of a thing, but it was not so much. And I even resisted that because I thought Amazon just wants more money, which could be true, but conversion rates, trust, all that stuff, so much better. So there's a lot of things looking back that I probably would have done differently, but it was very, I don't want to say manual, but there was a lot less to work with. And there was a lot of experimenting and guessing. Is this going to work? Is this not? And that still happens today, but there was also a much smaller investment that you could put into something to test. Hey, I'm going to spend $1,000 on this product and see how well this sells. You know, and then maybe I'll go back and buy more and I can get better unit economics, whatever the case might be. Now, you really need to have a plan. You need to stick to that plan, know if you're on the right path or not. I mean, you obviously don't just spend money and drive it into the ground, but you really have to be strategic. And it does require a lot more capital to get up and running and stay up and running. And that I think is probably one of the biggest changes. Like people want to talk about software and people want to talk about creative and all this stuff. And all that stuff is very different. But I just think the amount of energy that goes into getting up and running and being successful, it's a it's a much bigger lift than it was 5+ years ago. But
So I feel like
honestly,
what I'm
even a
hearing you
couple
saying
years
is that
ago.
like running a small test might actually be easier now than it was 5 years ago, but surviving and thriving on the marketplace is harder because of, I guess, there's more competitors, there's more fees, there's more supply chain noise. I mean, in terms of like how the playing field is changing, I don't know. Maybe the way to frame this question, Michael, is what are you seeing in your strongest brands that is encouraging you right now, or that you would say, this seems to be where the puck is headed, so to speak.
The ones that are really invested in their brand, meaning they know what they stand for as a brand. They're not trying to be all things to all people, but they're really focused on who their target audience is, refining the products that they have and creating new products that fit that target audience. Again, not being all things to all people, but just being really focused on that market. The ones that are leaning into updating of things, so creative, updating of ad strategy, who are willing to spend more, especially those that have been established for a while, we're able to get a better return on ad spend than someone who's, brand new to the market. And the ones that also are multi-channel, that aren't just Amazon only, that becomes helpful to them because it's another channel that they're getting their product across. When something goes wrong with Amazon and Amazon's your only channel, it feels like the end of the world. And it's not often the end of the world, but it can feel like that. And I think it can cause you to make bad decisions. So the ones who are really brand focused, who are leaning into changes, allowing us to pivot and make changes for them. Hey, premium A+ content is now available. Let's create this. Let's do this thing. Hey, we're seeing a change in advertising, so we want to start going in this way. The people that are leaning into those changes and that are continuing to develop in their lane, that's who I think is really, that's who we're seeing be the most successful. And the people who are like, I don't know, maybe I just want to do a little bit here. I just kind of want to put a little bit more. I don't know if I want to, invest in this thing for my brand, whatever the case might be. That timidity is something that we have to fight against, because it's basically a willingness to settle for mediocrity. And I've talked with brand specialists who work in retail and they're getting food brands on the shelves. and a friend of mine named Ainsley Moyer, and she said a lot of brands will say, "I'm just going to get my packaging just good for now, and then get it on the shelves, and then I'll start, you know, updating that." And it's the exact wrong mentality, because once you're on the shelf, that's not the whole battle. It's how do you get someone to pick it up, put it in their cart, actually purchase from you, and your branding is a big part of that.
The thing I feel like you're saying here that makes so much sense to me is that now is not the time to rest on any laurels, right? I mean, I think if you were launching a product on Amazon 5 years ago, there was still enough blue ocean that if you got a few things right, you could get traction and ride the wave and make some money. But now, because of how well, it's just competitive, and there's been a little bit of headwinds on demand, meaning you actually have to have the best product for people to buy it. And having the best product, by the way, like this is kind of marketing 101, but having the best product means having the best offering, right? So your listing is the best and your content is the best and the explanation is the clearest, and my customers aren't getting things they don't want. And the first point you made a minute ago that I really loved, Michael, was this idea of what if we took a step even further back and asked the question, what does our brand stand for? Who's the hero of our story? What's the battle cry that we care about? And the days of it being, let me just I don't know, slap a green label on the white one, or like that kind of doesn't work anymore, right? I mean, is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, there has to be intentionality behind it, and you have to be willing to say, okay, this thing that's worked okay for us, has worked well for us for a while, maybe isn't working anymore. It's not working in our favor. So if you're seeing a competitor who their product may not necessarily be better than yours, but their packaging is much better, the listing looks better, you have to be willing to say, hey, it's time for us to make this change and invest in this so that we don't get left behind. Because if there's, I think, even an inkling that this could be a differentiator, you should lean into that. Don't, like you said, don't rest on your laurels. So looking at how the competitive landscape has changed, are some of your competitors making changes that you're not? Are there things that you're doing that really are making your product a better offering? I don't think we're technically in a recession, although I know that there are fears of that, and I think that whole finance thing is a much different conversation, much than maybe much deeper than just return on podcast would go. But the when people are fearful, I believe, of problems or issues, they start to make different choices. And when cost is a factor, I know when I've had a time where maybe my wife was laid off or I wasn't making as much money, like we changed shopping behavior. Maybe we purchased everything at Walmart as opposed to, Target, even though maybe we like Target more. I don't know. That's just an example, but really thinking about cost is something that drives people to make different purchasing decisions. And so the, yeah, I mean, are you leaning into brand is something that I think is super important, but are you willing to continue to iterate and change? And a lot of people are like, this is it. That's one of the biggest mistakes I made. I said, this is my thing. This is it. I'm not gonna make any changes. That's consumer error. That's their problem. And then you start to watch reviews go down. You start to watch problems. And so that was a lot of stuff that I learned that I had to then tell brand owners and sellers, like, you can't do that because it'll cause a problem. I've got personal experience in that. And I do think that that helped me in the long run, having that personal experience. So
But let me ask you the order of operations question here. So you've mentioned a couple of different potential investments to improve your offerings on Amazon. But let's say, and I don't want to pigeonhole a particular use case here, but you feel free to take it where you want to. Let's say I have $1,000 or $10,000, whatever the number is. Where are you investing that money first right now? I think you talked about Premium A plus. You talked about re-engineering your packaging. There may be a number of other things, but where, if somebody's trying to figure out what should I focus on, or what is it that you guys maybe are experimenting with at Cartology that you are the most bullish on right now in terms of generating ROI as you're looking to make those investments and not rest on the laurels and improve these listings?
first thing I would do is hire a really great agency. I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking. That's probably
Yeah,
the last thing you should do, if I'm honest. But I just wanted to say that because I thought it would be funny.
totally funny.
There's a lot of things, but honestly, before you would ever hire an agency like myself, and that's something that I talk about in the sales process with brands, is like, well, you could do this right now. You don't need me to technically do this. Or, hey, this may not be a good fit because what you have from a financial perspective should probably be invested in this thing over here and not our services. That's not, because the reality is a lot of terms get misused today.
Mm.
The word, I'll just use a word like discrimination. It's a very loaded word, right? Someone
Mhm.
discriminated against me. But also, you could make a discriminating choice to not go down a dark alley at night because you don't know who's down there, and you could get hurt. I make a
Mm.
discriminating choice to take a right here versus a left because I see a tornado over there. So you can discriminate against people based on race or gender. Shouldn't be doing that. But that word in and of itself is not the bad thing. It's how people use and apply that. I'm going to double click on that. People say things like value, add value. That's not what agencies do, in my opinion. And my opinion is not always right, but I think that I'm correct in this area because when you add value in its literal sense, you're adding money or time or something, right? And we don't just add time or money to your business. That's not what we do. We help you take value that is inherent in your brand or product and fix root causes that are in there for business problems that you have that have negative impacts and help turn those into positive impacts that then help fix the business problem. But we address those root causes and we help uncover the value that's in your brand or product. And that is what then generates increased value in your business. So we don't add value, but we help uncover it and polish it. Like
Beautiful.
pressure testing a diamond or something like that. Maybe we're the pressure, but you're the brand, you're the the product owner. That's really what people are going after. Um, what is the first thing that people should do? I think it would depend upon the amount of money. If someone said, I have $1,000 versus I had $10,000, I think I would have them do something different. If someone had $1,000, and what are we talking about here? Are we talking about like a brand new brand? Or are we talking about someone who's already existing? Because I also think that that might matter. Maybe I'm just being too particular about this question, but yeah, are we
Well, I think
talking?
that's great, Michael, because you're an expert, right? So I think when you're talking to an expert, there's so much nuance. So in my mind, let's say we have $1,000 budget and the other guy has a $10,000 budget. Like, and maybe what would be the difference between a new brand and an established brand that maybe is flat this year? Because I think that context is really important. Like the most popular question I get on every single podcast I'm on is, Tyler, how profitable should a FBA business be? And there's so much more context to it that should be.
What's
So
the right ACOS? What's the right ROAS? What's the right? And what is your answer? It's 2 words, right?
it depends. Yep. And for me, it depends completely upon cost of goods sold. But for you, there's gonna be some other things that it depends on. So maybe like thumbnail sketch that a little bit, right? I've got small budget, I've got bigger budget, I've got small startup versus more established product. How does that change your decision matrix on where you would discern, making those investments?
I think if you're more of an established brand, I think one of the things, and this is something that I've had to do when revenues change or things change. But if you're established, regardless of when things are good or bad, you should be looking at what am I spending and is it really the right amount? So for an established brand, maybe you say, I've got $1,000. What should I do with it? Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the right question is, do you actually have more that you could free up in your business? So what am I spending on softwares? Am I really getting the return on this? Is this the right software that I'm using? Is this service that I'm paying for actually helping me? All those, I think, are the questions you could be asking. You could walk away with, what should I do with this, with this additional money? For an established brand, if you're like, I've got an extra $1,000, I might just say put that in your savings account. I don't know that there's a lot that you could or should necessarily do with that until you've got more there. If you're a brand new brand and you've got, a smaller budget to experiment with, I might say spend $1,000 before you ever go to market on really, instead of buying a cheap, well, honestly, there's two ways that you could go about it. One is I just want to kind of test something in general. So I'm going to buy a cheap product and see if it'll work. But the reality is, if you do that, especially with how discerning the consumer is, because now versus 10 years ago, people have a lot more information at their fingertips. They can do a lot more research. They can find out more than they ever could before. And they don't really need you because they can do and evaluate stuff on their own. I mean, that's something that happens in the sales process. Like, you just go out and start pitching people. I've heard the term pitch slap, which I think is kind of funny, but you just start going pitching people. You don't really know about their problem. They now know everything about what you do, and you know nothing about them, and you can't actually really help them. So you've just given them, hey, here's my solution. It's like, great. Well, I don't know if that's the solution for me. So I'm going to go on to the next thing. That's a problem. So if you got $1,000, take the time to think about brand. That doesn't cost a lot of money. I'm not talking about your logo, not talking about color scheme even. I'm saying do an in-depth, what's the word I'm looking for? Do an in-depth, like, brand creation phase. So there's a couple different ways you could do it, but who's my audience? Who do I at least think my audience is? The more you start talking about that stuff, the more you're like, okay, maybe that isn't my audience, maybe it is, but start developing that, maybe what that avatar looks like. Think about, even before then, what is the mission that I actually want to solve? Because anything that or the mission that I want to accomplish, anything that you're going to do, it's going to require a lot more thought. So if you just get started and you don't do the right thinking, you don't do the right homework, it's going to, I think, bite you in the end. So think, okay, what am I out here to do? What's my mission? Again, that doesn't cost you money, it just costs time, which is a valuable resource, maybe even more valuable than money, but it's your time. So what am I trying to do? What am I out here to do? From a product standpoint, what is it that I actually want to create? And is the thing I'm thinking of creating solving this problem that I know my end user has? Then defining more of who your end user is, then thinking about brand. What's the tone I want to have? What is my tone of voice? How do I want people to feel when they think about my brand? I have a deck of cards in my desk that I haven't used it in a while, but it's basically like a brand voice deck. So you go through and you have a yes, no, maybe pile. Like, yes, this is what my brand is. No, this is not what my brand is. And I'm kind of unsure. And it's a bunch of adjectives. And you just go through and say, here's how I want this to feel. And sometimes I'll do different iterations of that until I whittle it down. That's what I did with my podcast. So you get really clear on your voice. And then once you have a better idea of your voice, what you want to do, what you're out here to do, start thinking about, how do I get the best product possible? So instead of spending $1,000 on 1,000 units at $1, buy some test units, pressure test them, maybe I know services of people that all they do is help you build like the right prototype. Some guys I had on my podcast last year that they've got a really great system where they've got boots on the ground in China. They will get stuff delivered from the actual factory, because a lot of people don't know, when you order a sample from, let's say, an Alibaba or something like that, there are sample factories and then there are actual factories. And so the product that you get that's a sample may not be from the same factory. And you're also oftentimes dealing with a rep of a rep of a rep of a manufacturer. So there's many layers deep. And these guys, for very inexpensive, like maybe $150, $200, I think I could be quoting them, but it's a couple $100 to help you test and find the right prototype and then secure that factory. So it's getting it from the right person. Once you know you've got the right product, that I think, and you have a good idea of your brand, then the rest of the journey starts. But that should really be, if you're not up and running it, that should really kind of be your first steps. And that feels really slow, but I think that's the exact speed that you should go at, because you could spend $1,000 on some product and then start getting yourself in a hole, versus spend $1,000. Maybe you realize, oh, I don't want to do this at all, and I only wasted $1,000. I only spent $1,000 on it, as opposed to 10, 100, 500,000 on this thing.
Well, that's right. For most of the businesses that you and I would represent, $1,000 experiment is really inexpensive education expense. Whereas, 5 and 6 figure investments. So here's the way I love where your thoughts went. So I was thinking very tactical. And Michael, one of the things I really love about you, Michael's like, wait a minute, let's make sure that we understand the core of why we're delivering and what we're delivering to our customers. And I think that's brilliant. So let me try this out. This is something I've been chewing on here the last couple of days. Actually, is I can design a product business, and I got to start from somewhere. And in my mind, there's only four potential starting points. Like the maze might lead you to some picture of success that, of course, you need to define. But I think those four potential starting points are: I either start with a problem, like I've got to solve a problem. I start with a person, like I understand my customer, what she looks like, what her feelings are, and then I use her to find the problem, like that kind of thing. I start with a source. I have had some clients that just have a absolute banger connection with a factory because their aunt owns it, that kind of thing. And they
Yeah.
have the ability to say, Mom, what can you make at $2 a unit, right? Maybe you can start from a source. And then finally, you could start with a marketplace, which I think is I really think this is the root of your answer to my question is that 5 years ago, starting with just an Amazon algorithm marketplace as my starting point, and then using Helium 10 or some other tool to reverse engineer my product might have been a viable strategy. But it's almost like, unless your mom owns the factory in China now, you actually maybe need to get more focused on the first two, which is either focusing on a problem that I'm passionate about solving, or a person that I'm passionate about serving, and solving a problem or serving a person. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it was really well said. The only nuance on top of that that I would add is if you're just thinking about the marketplace and trying to only reverse engineer something, it will be really difficult because the consumers, like I said, more educated. So they want
Yep.
more from things. They've got way more options. Price could be a factor, but if you can prove to them that it's worth whatever your product price is, might end up being worth it for them. But you would need someone to help you if you're like, I know the marketplace, but I don't know quite the problem or the person. You're going to need to find someone to help you to design that and do
Right.
it well from the get-go, and that's not cheap to do.
No. Good point. Really, really good point. Well, Michael, this has been a great discussion.
I agree.
Before we, yeah. So you know what? Could not agree more. No,
This
but
was a
hey,
great discussion.
this
I
is
love hearing
actually
myself talk.
Michael's like, I've heard some real nuggets of genius here today, guys. There's nothing I can no, but
I will say this. I from my podcast that I record, I will see quotes that get pulled out because we'll always pull, because we'll pull a quote out from a guest. We'll pull out a quote from me, and that will be some of the content that we put out. And I'll see some of the stuff that's on there, and I'm like, that person said that. That's really smart. And then I look at something, and I'm like, I said that. Wow. I mean, I know that I'm knowledgeable, but like that sounds pretty good. I'll take that. I'm almost like, did someone make that up? That wasn't really me, was it? But that's encouraging to see when you see something
yeah.
like that.
No, it definitely is. It is really funny. And by the way, for those of you guys who have never recorded a podcast, you're like, that sounds really insane. But once you do about 20 of these, I got to say, the words do kind of get a little jumbled up. And you're like, what was it oh, I did say that 5 weeks ago when I was doing the third show of the week that I was recording and in the middle of all these other meetings and stuff. So, hey, listen, let's get, I want to talk about cartology for a minute, and then I want to talk about you for a minute. So, if somebody's listening to this, maybe they're watching on YouTube or maybe they're listening to it on a podcast player, and they should get in touch with you stat. What's the feeling? What's the pain point that they're experiencing that would say, if you're feeling this, reach out to Michael, and I'll of course have his contact in the show notes.
I am seeing changes in business performance that I don't know how to quantify, or I don't know how to quite figure out what the source of those changes are, or I'm not seeing traction where I want it. My sales are not where they want it to be. I cannot get my ads to perform well or have the right direction where they're going, because if they're not going to perform well in the beginning, that's the reality. For most things, it's very rare that you're going to start getting a 3, 4, 5 to 1 return within the first 6 months, maybe even let alone the first year, which most people get wrong. Is they're not going to be profitable. They're not going to get a strong return, but do you know what you're driving towards? So if anything is performing poorly and you need help diagnosing that or just finding out more, that's why you should reach out to me. It doesn't mean that I can or will be able to help you, but then we start to have a conversation that says, okay, tell me more where it hurts. And I can start. I'm not a physician, so I just want to be clear about this, but it's like a
Actually, Michael, I'm really glad you clarified that, because there was a moment there where I thought you were, a physician, and that these were going to really
can I
feel
give legal advice? Can I give medical advice? But it's similar to, in that process, it's similar to a physician. Like, all right, you say that your leg hurts. Tell me about your back. Are you having problems with your back? And it's like, why the
right.
hell are you asking me about my back? And it's like, I'm trying to find different spots where I know there could be pain and there could be a problem. And so I'm trying to better understand that, because I could say, are you getting a good return on ad spend? And you might say, yeah, but really, are you? Do you really know? So I have to ask the right questions to figure that out. So that's why you should reach out. It doesn't mean I can't help. I would love to be able to help, but I have to know really more about what's going on. And that's the part that is the most, I think, difficult initially, is like, what really is the issue or the problem? What are the actual impacts that are happening to your business? Because I kind of know, I know the business problems that I help address. I know a lot of the typical impacts. I know the root causes, but I don't know what yours are specifically. So
Love it, love it. And by the way, that's the other benefit of talking to an expert, where you don't get the canned FAQ. You get the more dialed in. Hey, final question here. One of the things we promise on ROP is that they're going to get a return on this pile of minutes they've given to us to listen to it. And so I just wanted to ask you: is there a habit, hack, practice, rhythm, Michael, that has given you an outrageous return on investment in your life here recently?
yeah, and you may even know what my answer is going to be. It's not going to be like investing in your health, investing in your sleep. All that stuff is really important. And I had a sleep issue that went on for a while. I finally got it figured out. I spent the last year kind of recovering from that, and that's been a game changer. But one of the things that came from that is I was taking a medicine that was basically causing this issue. It's causing something called RBD, stands for REM behavior disorder. Like, in the middle of the night, I'm like kicking, punching, screaming, cursing. Not fun at all, especially when my wife is next to me trying to sleep. And
Yeah.
so it turned out there was this anti-anxiety medicine I was taking that was causing this. After you take it for 10 plus years, extended period of time, it causes this issue. Took me about a year to figure that out. Thank God I finally did. Stopped taking the medicine. Sleep was great. And then my anxiety kicked up really, really big time. And I've dealt with that for the past like 19 years. When I was
Mm.
18, I got diagnosed with depression after an accident. And anyway, really focused on having a better mental health perspective. But the thing that has helped me the most, and that I truly get the most return on, is having a really strong relationship with God. Now, that plays out in a lot of different ways, but the reason I say that is because there's a lot of difficult things in the world. I cannot do them on my own. I cannot possibly do it. Humans will always fail you. And so if I'm putting my faith in myself or trying to work my way out of something, it will inevitably end in some kind of failure. But when my perspective is that, hey, I'm trusting that, and it's a much deeper conversation than this, but I'm trusting that if I get right with God and I spend time with him in the morning, which is what my routine is, spend time with him in the morning, talk with him, read through the Bible, really get clear on what direction I need to go, and be open to what he has for me that day, things go a lot better. I'm a lot more calm when problems do happen. I can traverse through them better. And I'm not so rooted in that problem where, hey, this thing's failing. This thing feels like a problem. This is a difficult situation. I'm not rooted in the fact that that's difficult. It's a little bit of this too shall pass, but I just know that this thing has purpose and intention. And so I'm going to get through it on the other side. It doesn't mean it will be removed. And if anything, a lot of times things become more difficult when you do choose that route of following after God. But that's really the thing that's given me the best return. I'm a human. I still err. I still have problems, but my goal is to stay plugged into that red phone line that maybe the president has in his office. That's how I call, but it should be something I pick up more regularly, not just in case of emergencies.
Love it. We're really, really well said, Michael. www.thinkcartology.com. Remember, Michael has a great podcast as well called The Longer Game. It sounds like episode 15 has a great guest on it. Check that one out.
Incredible guest, really smart guy, really brilliant. Has owned a couple businesses, is a good friend of mine. And wait, it's you. You're the guest on
Oh my
episode
gosh,
15.
this
That's
is
who it is.
good.
Okay, I knew
Yeah.
that I knew that you look familiar.
That's great. Well, Michael, thanks for joining Return of Podcast today. We're going to make sure that everyone can get a hold of you. Thanks for being transparent. I think you said you're still human. That's a good thing, man. That you really embrace your humanity, and I see how your walk with the Lord is impacting the way you make decisions and lead, and it inspires me. So appreciate you, buddy. And then guys, for anybody who's made it 40 minutes into this podcast, I just want to thank you. I mean, this is a gift that you give Michael and I to give us your attention, to spend time with us. And we both sincerely hope that you have an unbelievable week. And until we see you next time on Return on Podcast, take care. We'll talk to you soon.